Hello and welcome back. Today we are continuing our lecture series on World War One, more specifically, causes of World War One Part II. So in our last lecture, we talked about nationalism and we talked about imperialism. Today, we're going to talk about militarism and alliances. So, because all of these countries are competing for more colonies, for resources to fuel their economies, you have to have a large military to be able to do that. And so, we're going to see a rise in the intellectual philosophy of militarism, or the use of force to solve your problems. Militaries become a more and more crucial part of these countries' foreign policy, or how they deal with other nations. In particular, we're going to see that in Germany. Germany is using the military to unite the German people. Remember, they're a new country. They're former, German city states that have always kind of thought of themselves as like Prussians first. Well, they use the military and forced conscription to give every German person of Germanic ancestry a shared, unique, common experience. And so more and more of these countries are relying on their militaries. That means these military leaders are gaining more and more power and more influence within their countries. And so, as the military leaders, professional military guys gain more and more power. In some countries, they'll become even more powerful than the civilian political leadership, which leads you down a dangerous road, because of course, career military guys want to rely on the military to kind of solve issues, and and that's what's going to happen here. That's why in America we have civilian leadership over the military. It's to try and make sure that career military guys don't get in, don't get too much power. And that's not to say, that's not a criticism of the military. It's anytime that you have experts in the field, that they always want to kind of empower their field, and that's what's happening within Europe. So I don't want to be too critical of the military here, but we definitely know that once militaries become more powerful than their civilian counterparts, war does become more likely. And so that's what's happening all across Europe. You're going to see countries like Germany using conscription or compulsory military service to be able to field incredibly large armies, armies of millions of people, the size that the world had never seen before. Now, they should have known this was coming. They could have been paying attention to the American Civil War and recognized that warfare has changed, and battles, hundreds of thousands of people were kind of be the norm. But the people weren't paying attention to that, and so we see the size of the military grow, and very large peacetime armies. Now, what will happen is when your neighbor like Germany all of a sudden has this massive army, that's going to freak you out. So if you're France and you're on the border of Germany, and Germany builds up this gigantic military, what are you going to do? Well, you don't want your neighbor to be so powerful that they can just squish you. So you build up your military as well. And when you build up your military, then Germany feels threatened. So they feel they have to build up their military even larger, particularly when there's this sense of nationalism, or this the idea of grouping people together by their ethnicity or their race. That means everybody that's not part of your race or your ethnicity is the enemy. When they get a strong military, you're going to be threatened by that, and you're going to build up your military. And so we just see what is essentially an arms race. And so the top-notch militaries are re-equipping every 20 years with brand new weapons and brand new technologies, and which is going to make warfare just extremely deadly. So, because of conscription, Germany is able to mobilize about 3.5 million troops when World War I breaks out in 1914. France and Russia are going to be a little bit behind that. Great Britain, who doesn't have any conscription, is going to be significantly behind that. But what that does is it forces nations to mobilize. When Germany builds theirs up, everybody else feels like they have to increase their militaries to compete, and essentially, just escalates the problem. So, industrialization is also going to help militarization as well. There's going to be all kinds of brand new weapons because of industrialization and Taylorism. They're able to, create things very efficiently. Taylorism is just the industrial concept of efficient movement within a factory. The assembly line and things like that are going to make us able to mass produce artillery and guns and just all the things necessary for war. And so that's going to make more weapons available and better, more efficient killing instruments available for warfare. We're not in the old muzzle loading rifles anymore that take forever, which kind of was a good thing because it kept the amount of killing down. They were very inaccurate. It took a long time to load. You couldn't kill people very quickly. By the time we get to World War I, we're going to start to see machine guns, which the Maxim machine gun created by Hiram Maxim. It's going to weigh like 50, 60 pounds. So it's not like every soldier has one, but that's going to be able to kill massive amount of people in a relatively short period of time. Railroads are going to be able to move troops faster and keep troops supplied longer. And so this is the thing. Railroads are going to give Germany a serious advantage in the beginning of this war because they're going to be able to get their troops to the front much quicker. And that's why they'll have some initial success. That'll be stopped, at the Battle of the Marne, but they'll have some initial success because they can move troops faster, and they think that's going to be enough. But because the French stopped them, it's not going to be enough to win the war. But what it does do it allows for countries to, when the fighting starts and the troops are on the battlefield, right, it allows those troops to be supplied longer. And so behind the troops, there's like railroads that are going to funnel in the food and the weapons that are going to allow them to fight for years and years and years on end. So it used to be, two armies would meet on a battlefield, they'd fight, the fighting would be over in a day because then they had to like go back and find food and scavenge the countryside. And so these long drawn out months long battles just couldn't happen because you couldn't keep your soldiers fed. And so railroads are going to allow for these battles to last much, much longer, which means millions of people are going to die. And that wasn't possible before railroads, or it was highly unlikely before railroads, because these better supply lines allow people to fight longer, which allow people to more people to die. Quick firing weapons and high explosive shells are also going to be deadly. We're also going to see poison gas being used during World War I. So weapons of mass destruction that are just going to rack up the body count. Guns are going to be much more accurate. And so when you shoot, you can be pretty assured that you can hit what you shoot at. That's because of rifled barrels. They're way more accurate than the previously unrifled muskets used in the Revolutionary War, and even more accurate than the mini balls and rifled guns used during the American Civil War. So much more accurate, much longer range, much more volume, which means higher body counts. So the technology as well is also going to become deadly because it is moving faster than the strategy, and so people are still fighting the old style wars, right? So the British, really, kind of revolutionized warfare using rifles because back in the 1600s, 1700s, because what happened, they were not accurate, so everybody would line up shoulder to shoulder, and you would put up what is called a wall of fire, and so everybody would fire at the same time because I couldn't guarantee that I was going to hit what I was aiming at, so I just shoved a bunch of bullets at you. So I stood in front of I stood in front of my enemies and my enemies stood in front of me, and we just kind of fired at each other. And the most disciplined side, the side that like stood there and fired the fastest without breaking apart and running away, won. Well, that's fine when rifles aren't accurate. That's the smart strategy. But now that rifles are accurate and I can actually hit what I aim at, and I can, I don't have to I don't have to either breech load or muzzle load the rifles. I can just pull a trigger multiple times and multiple bullets come out, and I got a guy with a machine gun behind me pulling everybody down, and I'm lobbing explosive shells at you. It doesn't make a lot of sense to just stand in one place in a big open field, but that's what these generals are going to try and do because that's just what they've always done. And so it's going to lead to just absolute massacres, people running into machine gun fire. That just doesn't make sense. And so it's because these generals thought that that their side, because again, nationalism, this idea that you group people by ethnicity, and then people believe that their ethnicity or their race is better than the other race, it ultimately leads to, well, I think I'm superior, so I'm going to crush you quickly. Right, that my technology must be better than your technology, and my soldiers must be stronger and braver than your soldiers because my race is better than your race. And it just doesn't make sense. And what ends up happening is we find out very quickly that that's not the case. And the other side is just as brave as you and just as strong as you, and their technology is on par with your technology. And if we just stand here and shoot at each other, we're both going to end up dead. And so, that's kind of essentially what ends up happening. People think it's going to be quick infantry charges, but the truth is, we really get a stalemate very quickly. Once we get to the Battle of the Marne, and we'll talk about in a future lecture, what happens is the two sides meet out in the field, and they start shooting at each other, and then they realize, holy cow, this is dumb. And so what they do is, to take cover, you essentially dig a hole in the ground and hide in it. And so that it ultimately ends up becoming trench warfare. And so we get this really quick stalemate where both sides are frozen in place, and the only time you would go over the top or get out of your trench, that's what going over the top means, you'd have to run across this football field length field while people are shooting at you to try and get into your enemy's hole in the ground. I mean, just massive amounts of death will ensue. And that's why World War One, one of the most famous quotes describing World War One is the spade becomes more important than the rifle. A spade is like a small shovel, because it's, if you're going to survive, standing in a field shooting at somebody with your rifle ain't going to cut it. You're going to need to dig a hole in the ground. And so World War One becomes known for trench warfare. So the next major cause of World War One is going to be the defensive alliance system, and so we have kind of talked about this before. Based on the alliance system is going to be based on essentially two different things. One is nationalism; it's grouping by race or ethnicity. So we'll see the Germans and the Austrians are both German descent, and then also economic reasons. Germany and Austria are going to also group together because they want to expand. They feel like the French and the British have all the good colonies, so they're going to group together for that reason. Italy will initially kind of join together with Germany for that same economic reason for colonies, but Italy will switch sides. And the Ottoman Empire, which is crumbling, that wants resources and to get their colonial empire back, they're going to join with the Germans and the Austrian Hungarians. The Allies are the Triple Entente, the two different names for them. I'll probably call them the Allies more often than the Entente, but who knows? The same thing. Are going to be England and France. Both England and France are united mostly for economic reasons because they want to maintain their colonial empire. France, remember, hates Germany because of Alsace and Lorraine, and so they're going to side with Russia. Russia is going to be fighting the Germans and Austrian Hungarians for nationalistic reasons because they're protecting the Slavs of Serbia, but also for economic reasons because they want to make sure that the Black Sea and the Balkan Peninsula area remains open to them for trade. Eventually, the United States will also join the Allies for essentially two reasons: one, to protect democracy, because England and France are strong powerhouse democracies. That will be the main reason that the United States joins. But it's also for trade. Our biggest trading partner is England, and when England is looking like they're in dire straits, we want to make sure that they survive because our economy is so dependent on theirs, and because the Germans are attacking our shipping into England. So then the Central Powers, we'll see why they're called the Central Powers later, are Germany and Italy, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottomans. Germany and Austria-Hungary, like I said, are united for ethnic reasons or racial reasons. Italy and the Ottomans, more economic reasons, because they want access to colonies. Italy will see the writing on the wall and will switch sides to the Allies. They'll do some fighting for the Allies, as a matter of fact. And then, they'll be upset at the end of the war because they don't get the colonies that they thought they were going to get for switching sides and helping the Allies. So, why were the alliances formed? It's not just racial reasons, it's not just economic reasons. It was also this belief that if you create allies, you can create what is known as a balance of power that will keep different countries from attacking each other, right? We'll talk about this kind of concept of balance of power more during the Cold War with mutually assured destruction, right? It's the reason why the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War never went to war with each other, is because we could just wipe each other costly. And the belief, in the early 1900s was it was the same kind of thing that neither side would attack each other, because if I attacked you, all your friends would join in, and then all my friends would join in, and that would just be bad for everybody. It didn't work that way. In reality, it just created a volatile situation when one little spark could ignite a gigantic flame, right? My friends and your friends might not have a problem with each other. They might not have a beef with each other, but if me and you get into it, all of a sudden it goes from a small conflict, right, to a huge conflict involving a bunch of people. That's what World War I is, right? We see a small conflict between Serbia and Austria-Hungary and Bosnia too. That's a regional small thing that's going to essentially just light the entire world on fire, or at least the entire Western world on fire, I should say. And so these alliances don't really pan out. So the German alliance is called the Central Powers. And if we take a look at the map here, we can see why they're referred to as the Central Powers. The German alliance is in that, like, I don't know what color is that, pink, peach, whatever it is. The yellow countries are the neutral nations, and then the green countries are the Entente, or the Allies. We can see that Germany and Austria-Hungary are, their alliance is called the Central Powers because they're right in the center of Europe, which means they're surrounded on both sides. They're going to have to fight a two-front war. They're going to have to fight on the Western front, France and England and essentially Italy eventually. And then on the Eastern front, they're going to have to fight Russia. And so this is a daunting task for Germany and Austria-Hungary. They think they're going to have a plan to figure out how to do this. It's going to fall apart, that plan, and ultimately a two-front war is going to lead to the destruction of the German, or definitely the destruction of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. They ain't going to survive this. They're going to end up becoming multiple different countries, but it's also going to lead to devastation for Germany as well. Okay, that concludes part 2 of our causes of World War I. I appreciate your time. We'll pick up tomorrow with part 3. Thank you very much. See you soon.